There exist in our world creatures man knows little or nothing about. Creatures that seem to have evolved ways of remaining largely hidden. Using natural mechanisms our meager five senses are unable to perceive. By their very nature, most cryptids seem to hide and even cower from man. But there are some that appear driven to hunt people. Such a creature inhabits the Tatra mountains of southern Poland. In English, the name translates as Rock Hag. The Polish hill shepherds call it Baba Skalna. The Tatras are the highest peaks in the Carpathian mountain range. For at least 500 years, they have formed a natural barrier which has divided the many countries that have come and gone. Nowadays, they separate Poland and Czechoslovakia. The last Tatra glacier melted 10,000 years ago, and by the 8th century, the foothills were being settled by Slavonic tribes. Known as the Polish Highlanders, the Gorals are an ethnographic subgroup who began to populate the area during the 13th and 14th centuries. These nomadic shepherds transformed the landscape with extensive tree felling and began to develop an oral tradition about a flying creature that terrorized their sheep. This is Kežmarok Castle in northern Czechoslovakia. In 1528, it came into the possession of the Wask family from Poland. Driven by natural curiosity, the Princess Beata Waska embarked on the first known tourist trip into the Tatras. Accompanied by 6 local burghers and some servants, Beata's expedition lasted only 3 days, because somewhere near Zelene Plazo, the party was attacked by a large, human-like bird.
The creature shamed me in its state of womanly undress, and its eagle skull head terrified even the bravest of my men. It alighted on one poor fellow and went about his shoulders and face. We later found a tooth embedded in the man's neck, which would make this beast more like a flying she-wolf, for eagles have no teeth. But the appearance overall was that of a shapely nymph, with the skull, wings and talons of an eagle.
On her return, Beata's husband was angered at his wife's impertinence in undertaking a trip without him, and had her imprisoned in the castle's tower for 6 long years. This was the first written account of the Baba Skalna. Later writers stated that the creature was believed to possess the ability to control the winds and command the eagles. Those who respected her domain were said to receive her blessings, while those who dishonored her faced dire consequences. In Slavic folklore, the alkonost is a bird with a woman's face whose singing can hypnotize anyone who hears it. But the alkonost is portrayed as a passive creature, whereas reports of the Baba Skalna chronicle violent attacks on man and beast alike. In 1810, a Hungarian hunter described how he was chased by a brown bear for half a mile until
a Baba Skalna fell out of the sky and tormented the bear's head. While thus occupied, I made good my escape and did not stop running until I could no longer hear the bear's agonized roars.
In 1847, a traveler writing under the pseudonym Carolina documented a journey through the Tatra Mountains. In her published journal, she describes a remarkable encounter with a Baba Skalna. Experiencing an eerie feeling, Carolina saw the Rock Hag perched high up on a ledge, its eagle wings outstretched, watching intently as she passed by below. Its head looked like the white skull of a large bird and had long, human-like hair. The encounter lasted several minutes, and Carolina was sure she was not mistaken in what she saw. She procured a feather she believed was from the creature, and this eventually found its way to the Hungarian Natural History Museum, where, curiously, it was identified as belonging to a member of the ostrich family. Ostriches are the world's largest bird, but are flightless. Giant ostrich-like birds have been reported throughout antiquity, but even the largest of the so-called elephant birds remain flightless due to their enormous weight and small wings. Therefore, we may discount them as suitable candidates for the Baba Skalna. In 1865, German naturalist Friedrich von Hagenwald suggested that the Baba Skalna might be related to a pterosaur. These prehistoric flying reptiles had long heads that could be mistaken for bony skulls. Pterosaurs' wingspan could measure up to 23 feet, but this featherless dinosaur would not explain the eagle wings so often reported on the Baba Skalna. In the 1880s, a traveling freak show featured a French woman who worked under the name Margot Aigle. Her manager had taxidermied eagle wings surgically sewn onto Margot's underdeveloped arms. She was exhibited in Germany as Die Adlerfrau, or Eagle Woman. But in the Austrian Empire, she was dubbed Baba Skalna. One newspaper story describes how Margot was attacked by two other Baba Skalnas as the show's wagons were moving through the Tatra foothills. Paying customers were allowed to inspect large scratches on a painted wooden panel said to have been made by the talons of the creatures. Over the summer of 1896, a horse-drawn carriage was reportedly attacked by a Baba Skalna as it made its way towards Zakopane. 3 teenage girls were thrown from the vehicle when the driver lost control of his horses as they were repeatedly harassed by a beautiful flying woman with a head like an eagle's skull. Another theory put forward around this time was that the Baba Skalna was a large, unknown species of eagle. The largest eagle known to science is Haast's eagle. First described in 1871, it had already been hunted to extinction in New Zealand by the Maori people in the 1400s. Although its wingspan could measure as much as 10 feet, it does not meet the much larger dimensions documented by eyewitnesses who have seen the Baba Skalna, and there is no evidence to suggest the species ever lived in the Northern Hemisphere. The Berg Roman, or mountain novel, was a genre of fiction that became popular in France towards the end of the 19th century. French-Canadian Clara Winterbourne wrote many novels set in the Alps and Carpathians. In her 1902 book, Un Cœur de Glace, Winterbourne's troubled heroine, Elsa Leblanc, is forced to spend a night on a mountain in the Tatras following a severe storm. Elsa dreams that she becomes a Baba Skalna and even sees her married lover and his family enjoying a carriage ride up to Morskioko. In the dream, she attacks the horses and drives the carriage off a cliff edge. The following day, Elsa comes down from the mountain and learns that her lover's family have all been killed in an accident similar to that which she dreamt. The inaugural railway in the region opened in 1899 and marked the decline of the picturesque scenes of horse-drawn carriages ferrying tourists into the Tatras, but not an end to sightings of the Baba Skalna. Polish composer Mieczysław Kurawowicz was killed by an avalanche in 1909, and this led to the formation of the Tatra Volunteer Rescue Service. Headquartered in Zakopane, the service holds the most complete records of Baba Skalna sightings over the last 60 years. In the 1920s, tourism began to expand in the region with the opening of ski resorts, and this led to more strange encounters. In one incident, a group of skiers spotted what they at first took to be a naked woman lying on a rocky precipice overlooking Morskie Oko. However, as they approached, the figure rose, unfurled giant feathered wings, and flew up into the sky. It had a long bird's skull, and its human female body was said to have an unnatural bluish shade to it. In 1926, Czechoslovakian director Viktor Novak made a film about a love affair between a Baba Skalna and a mountaineer.
A man and his wife are mountaineering in the Tatra Mountains. They hear singing and following the sound find themselves in dangerous rocky terrain. As the man makes good a safety rope, a Baba Skalna swoops down and snatches his wife up into the air. It then drops her into a gorge. The heartbroken man resolves never to leave the mountain until he has found his wife's body. After a long night alone in a wooden hut, the man awakes to find his wife standing outside. The man is overjoyed that his wife is alive, but it is the Baba Skalna in magical disguise. They stay on at the hut, but when they are making love that night, the Baba Skalna's true silhouette is reflected on the wall. The next day she returns from hunting with a young chamois, which the man notices seems to have been ripped open by an eagle. Days pass, and while out walking, the man finds his real wife's corpse. Realizing what has happened, he returns to the hut to confront the Baba Skalna. She attacks him but their fight is interrupted by passing climbers who think the man is strangling his wife. Thinking he has gone mad, they shoot him. The blast starts an avalanche that sweeps the cabin off the mountainside. They try as they might. The climbers search in vain for the man and the woman. Not noticing that they are being observed from on high.
This is Gwiazdopolski, the star of Poland. The balloon was designed to break the existing high-altitude record of 72,000 feet. The attempt was scheduled for September 1938 in the Chocholowska Valley in the Tatras, but adverse weather conditions pushed back the launch until October the 14th. On that morning, the 390-foot balloon was being filled with highly inflammable hydrogen. At least 5 eyewitnesses claimed that they saw a Baba Skalna drop down from the sky and briefly perch on top of the balloon. Part of the bag's apparatus was dislodged and fell down to the ground, narrowly missing bystanders. In the next few moments, a fire started on top of the bag and quickly engulfed the entire balloon. No one was hurt, but, except for the gondola, the balloon was completely destroyed. A second attempt was planned for the following year, but subsequent events would make this impossible. Ever since Poland regained its independence in 1918, aerial photography had been used to produce new topographical maps of the country. Zbigniew Piasecki was one of the pilots responsible for mapping the Tatra Mountains. In the spring of 1939, he saw something extraordinary whilst on an official flight. The large, medium-format camera mounted underneath his small plane was aimed downwards. Piasecki spotted what he thought were 2 enormous eagles flying just below him. The birds would have spoiled the photographs, and Piasecki circled, hoping they would move away. But instead, the creatures flew up toward him, and to his horror, struck and damaged the wing of Piasecki's plane. But he still managed to grab his own 35mm camera and take this series of strange photographs. He followed the 2 winged creatures for some time, but with his fuel running low, he was forced to return to his airbase. The photographs were reproduced in newspapers, magazines, and even as postcards before Germany invaded Poland in September 1939. The Second World War eliminated any need for additional horror in the press, and Piasecki himself was killed during the Battle of Britain in 1940. During the war, the Polish resistance in the region was known as the Tatra Confederation. One officer described how members of the group were tracking 7 German troops moving through the Tatras and saw them take shelter in a cave. Before the Poles could launch an attack, there was a great commotion and gunfire from within the cave. A Baba Skalna emerged, dragging a German soldier in its talons. The Skalna then flew up into the sky and dropped the man from a great height before disappearing from view. The Confederation members entered the cave and of the remaining 6 Germans, found only 1 alive, who soon died of his injuries. The story did much to improve morale amongst the resistance, and undoubtedly unnerved German forces in the area. The first cable car in the Tatras had opened in 1936 and took visitors to Kasprovi Virks, some 6,500 feet above sea level. In 1954, tourists were terrified when a large animal with enormous wings followed them for some minutes before alighting on top of their car. Witnesses on the mountainside observed what looked like a human figure with huge wings scratching at the roof of the moving car before it flew off. A föhn wind is an accelerated airflow on the lee side of a slope, whilst on the windward side, a warm, moist wind blows, often producing persistent rain. The föhn wind that sweeps through the Tatra mountains is known as Whinny. It is a merciless, destructive, warm windstorm that is thought to induce suicidal thoughts and depression in those living in its path. The Baba Skalna was said to cause Whinny by flapping its wings in order to torment the hill shepherds who protected their flocks from its attacks. 6 years ago, disease struck the sheep in the Tatras region. With stocks reduced, people began to fear that the starving Baba Skalnas would wreak revenge. Perhaps it was just coincidence, but in May 1968, a Whinny of incredible force laid waste to large areas of the region, with winds of up to 200 miles an hour. It became known as the wind of the century. Curiously, since that last great storm, there have been few sightings of the Baba Skalna. Were their numbers drastically reduced? Could they have been made extinct by the incredible force of the Whinny? We will have to wait and see if any new reports emerge over the coming years. Reports of a ferocious yet beautiful creature who may yet continue to jealously guard her mountainous domain.